May 3rd, 2023. Well, with everything going on with that we've been discussing in the last few videos, I kind of overlooked something that happened back on April the 19th, which is significant. However, this is something that's a little bit more timeless or not immediate because it's not as big a news story, but I think it's kind of an important situation. And that was that the Senate Emerging Threats Subcommittee I think of Armed Services, I believe, had a hearing with Dr. Sean Kirkpatrick of the All-domain Anomaly Resolution Office, which had been established studying the basically what we might historically have called the UFO problem. They're now calling it UAP. I think they changed the meaning. That originally it was called unidentified aerial phenomena. Now I think they're calling it unidentified anomalous phenomena. But at any rate, the point is, because they're not all in the air, so this was chaired by Senator Gillibrand of New York, and so it was kind of a very small meeting. Actually, only 3 senators showed up, and it turns out that in fact they actually had a classified hearing before this meeting, which is probably why everybody else didn't show up, because several other senators apparently were at the classified hearing. And whereas last year the House Intelligence Committee, one of their subcommittees or something, I think it was, did a hearing. They did it in the opposite order, and several subjects were brought up during the meeting, which kind of alluded to things that they then had to say, well, we can't discuss this here, but we'll address it in a classified hearing, which created a lot of suspicions about what might be covered up or so forth. So I think this time they did it in the reverse order so that the actual open meeting was almost completely scripted. And people reading from notes that were prepared and so forth. So it was very kind of drab, and the only thing that caught attention was the fact that he said there was no credible evidence, I think it was, that any of these phenomena represent an extraterrestrial or something that doesn't obey the laws of physics or something to that effect. And that got a lot of play, which sort of was played like, hey, nothing to see here. However, if you look a little deeper there, I think it is a little bit more significant. And by the way, if you like these videos, please give me a like. It does help with the algorithm. And subscribe if you haven't, if you're interested, because it would be helpful to keep this all going. So that's where we are on this. I think that there was one thing that I thought was interesting that they did mention very briefly, and almost, it's kind of that there were roughly, I think, was it 12, I believe, or was it more, people who had already come forward to provide information about this subject to the committee. And I think most of this work is within the government and armed services. I don't think they've really spread out very much into the civilian reports yet. And I do know that Lou Elizondo, formerly the head of the ATIP program, has said that he did come forward and provide evidence to that committee, to that group Arrow, And so all those things that he can't discuss publicly because of his security restrictions, and he legally can present to that committee. So we have to ask ourselves, how do we reconcile what he's been saying up to now and other people? Because I believe that some of the other people that are well known have also come forward and told what they know. And I guess so. I think the answer to that probably is that Dr. Kirkpatrick is a scientist, and I think he's judging credible by the standards of, I guess, what would go into a peer-reviewed journal. I think as a scientific fact. I guess that would present kind of why this is that, because we know, like, for instance, how does he explain the videos from the Nimitz incident, for instance, or the Roosevelt incident? I mean, these seem to me to be, very difficult to explain normally, and as far as I know, they still remain unexplained. He also presented a couple of cases, one which was just a commuter jet in the distance, and the has been identified anyhow, and the other one was one of these ball-like orb device objects which are reported in the UFO community. And if you recall, uh, one of those has been found on the ground that has anomalous characteristics, and was presented, for study, which I think is still being evaluated. And that looked to me very much like what that was. Um, Probably it's well, I'll try to say what it probably was. I have an idea what it might be. I know that I've mentioned that I kind of try to keep the space shows open lines updated on this, and I always get some rather interesting static from the host of the show on this, basically saying he doesn't seem to trust the government about it or something. Well, that's true, but I think the government here in the port, there are senators that are really pushing to get the truth out now, which is something that's is far more advanced than any of the previous historic cases. Um, and they're actually, this government the Aero organization has staffed up with a fairly significant staff over time. It sounds to me like of both intelligence people and scientific technical engineering staff to evaluate these cases. So I think this is a lot of progress. It's way above what was being done years ago under Project Blue Book. Um, the question I have also about this subject, because I have my own thoughts on it, as you know, is that uh, although this group is cleared for top secret, sensitive, compartmented information, this information, they have the security levels that they could have whatever they need to have, perhaps. Perhaps they have those levels. But the thing is that this is all also handled on a need-to-know basis. And since it has been alleged, even by people like Elizondo, that believes that the government is in possession of material from a UAP for study, and there are other reports going back for years about crash retrievals going back to the Roswell incident and several others. The question is, how can this be? I mean, is this guy lying, this director, or what? And my own thinking on this is that first of all, he's probably not taking the statements that people have made in and of themselves, if they're just a statement, as being scientifically validated information, first of all. Second of all, I doubt he actually has access to those programs that actually have the real hard evidence, because these are probably, uh, undisclosed special access programs of some type, buried somewhere in the defense national security infrastructure, somewhere between the intelligence community, it could even be Department of Energy, it could be Department of Defense or intelligence. And these are probably mostly contracted out to aerospace and other technology companies, and these are probably very compartmented projects. And so I think it's very likely that this group are not cleared for this material. Because my theory all along is that there is hard evidence that exists buried within the government infrastructure, but that's a guess. I could be wrong, but the point is, I don't believe that the people in charge of that are on board with going public with this information. And you can see that there's a letter that was just dated May the 1st, in which several the senators like Rubio and Warner are complaining that several features of the law that they've passed in the Defense Authorization Act are really only slowly being implemented, in some cases not implemented yet. For instance, they were supposed to have some venues for public disclosure, such as a Twitter site, which they've created, but they haven't posted anything yet, and so forth. So part of the issue is also that I think the group is primarily getting raw data that comes up from various pilots and radar operators and people in the Defense Department, which is definitely available. It isn't in any way compartmented. It's classified, perhaps, and they're open to getting that information and are privileged to get it. And then the other things, reports of people that are making claims about things that they know, but we don't know, for instance, exactly how much knowledge even somebody like, for instance, Lou Elizondo really has. Does he simply have suspicions because he's been around the peripheries of these subjects? Or has he actually, for instance, seen the objects themselves, for instance? And that's a good question. I'm thinking perhaps not on actually having actual hard evidence. That is, of the level I can, testify to under oath that it really is real. That's just a guess again. And then even if that happens, then Arrow has to beat their way through the doors of these groups who might be very hard to contact and might be very reluctant to be contacted. Again, that's a theory. What we really don't know also is exactly who runs this whole show. But I think it's a very interesting process. And I'm glad that it's ongoing. I'm a little bit more positive than Dave Livingston, the host of the Space Show, is about it. But I also agree that one can be skeptical. And I definitely think that there are two agendas within the government now. There's the agenda of, of analysis and providing the truth, and the agenda of kind of keeping it all under wraps for historic reasons, if nothing else. I mean, when this all started, I think it was considered to be a clear national security matter in a case of public interest, that there was concern of public I don't know, panic or whatever would occur back in the 40s and 50s. And I think that's a lot of the original motivation, plus the idea that analysis of data that they got from the studies would lead to some breakthroughs in technology that may have national security importance. However, after all these decades, it doesn't look like that's really happening. And in fact, the study itself may be hampered by all the security around it. Anyway, that's kind of my take on it. I think that any organization that calls itself the All-domain Anomaly Resolution Office definitely has a big charter ahead of them. I mean, all domains, that's a lot. But anyhow, I think it's good to see that there's progress there, and I guess we all need to kind of contact our senators and Congress people and urge them to continue to press this issue if we want to get to some answers. So anyway, that's basically what I have to say about this. This is a little unusual video, but I'm kind of getting away from the main political chatter, such as I've been, covering things like the Tucker Carlson issue, which I did in my last two videos. And you might want to check my comments I've placed after the last video, where I think I clarify a little bit more evidence of the theory I was supporting on that subject. And anyway, so I will wrap this up for now. I'll be posting this in addition to here on YouTube, on Rumble as well. And if you haven't subscribed over on Rumble, for subscribers and you're on Rumble, that's a good idea too. I'm kind of treating it at the moment as kind of my backup channel. And of course, my social media accounts are on the description below. And I'll also try to post a link to that article I mentioned about the senators wanting more information, a little clarification on that. So I'll wrap this up for now, and until next time.